and she curates and creates resources for nonprofits. And she's here, right here with us right now. It's Joyce.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, so I will be the first to say that thank you all for coming, and I know today's weather is not the best for people to travel in. So because now we have a smaller group, it's nice and cozy. I do want you to feel that the session is casual. Please feel free to just insert a comment or a question. Let me know. So then throughout the presentation, if you have anything that stops your interest, just shout it out. And feel free to move closer if you feel like it. Don't worry if you don't want to. It's okay. And please grab food throughout the presentation. I'm not gonna be offended if you just get up and grab something, like what Dawn is doing now. But I will point you out. Don't worry. So we are going to talk about trends for nonprofit sector in 2016, but I do think it's important to kind of reflect back last year to see what actually happened. So this is going to be an overview of the things that happened in 2015 for the tech industry, not specifically in nonprofit, because I do think sometimes it's good to kind of zone back out a little bit just beyond the nonprofit sector to see the possibilities of what's happening around us. So one thing that we did see is a very maturing 3D printing market. So this is a picture of a 3D printed rhino horn. This is actually still a project that is in development. The person who printed this has this idea, and whether you think it's gonna, be effective or not is still up for discussion. But his brilliant idea was to 3D print rhino horns and flood the black market to decrease the actual poaching of rhinos. So there's this huge online debate. This has not happened yet, but this technology has been developed last year. So that's all to say that 3D printing has been adopted en masse. It's more accessible. There's a case where students, grade 12 students, printed a little wheelchair for a kid born without, I believe, the rear legs. And they were able to do this because their school had a 3D printer on site. So again, 3D printing is more accessible, whether it's at a school or at a co-working facility or just a 3D printing workshop. It's a lot easier for people, even if you don't have the 3D printer at home, to actually experiment with it. There's a lot of open source prints that you can try out. You can use a lot of online programs now to actually create your own product and test print as well. Going back to the rhino horn, we're getting more creative with materials. You can 3D print biological cells. There's also 3D printed cartilage for ear replacements. I like your reaction. Nose replacements. So it's been really great for the medical industry. They can print a lot of prosthetics and also, again, living cells. So 3D printing has been around for a long time. It's been around for not just in the consumer market, but in the manufacturing business. But more recently, we can see that it has been adopted quite well mainstream. On the other spectrum, virtual reality. It seems like every year everyone is promising VR to just explode and it's going to change our lives. We're going to learn all these different things. It's going to be Minority Report everywhere. But we're still holding our breath. It has hit consumer market, not en masse, but it is quite pricey. So not a lot of people have adopted it. All the uses for it that people promise will be outside of gaming and entertainment hasn't happened.
We're doing cool stuff with VR next year.
Hey,
Yeah,
can you
we're
introduce yourself and the company that you're with and what you're doing?
Oh yeah, so my name's Karen Rudy. I work at HTC Consulting, which is just upstairs. And yeah, my company is very excited about HR. We've had Oculus experts in, and flown down to LA to meet with the LucasArts folks.
Nice.
And yeah, we have some really cool ideas to work, tie that into nonprofit fundraising and whatnot, especially, around children's charities, children's hospitals, animal care, virtual adoptions, amazing. There's lots of exciting stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of people are also looking into the possibility of using VR. When people are doing crowdfunding campaigns, a lot of times they will build kind of a 3D model of, especially if it's a facility that they're trying to fundraise for. There's this potential that you could use VR to actually show the people who are backing your campaign a virtual reality of your building. So then people can take tours and see what you're actually trying to build, not just beyond just a 2D image. So again, really exciting promises, but it hasn't happened yet. And exactly, like that's why a lot of people are predicting that this year is the year, and like now a lot of people are saying like this is the critical year because of the last couple of years of promises. So here it's not related to nonprofit, but Star Citizen, if you're not aware of it, is one of the biggest crowd-funded game to date because it's supposed to be a fully immersive galaxy that people can fly starships, again use their Oculus Rift or any other virtual reality device and explore planets and systems. And yeah, if you're motion sickness, then maybe not play this game. But it has like I don't remember the numbers, but over like 30 billion US like invested in this, and it just keeps growing to the point that each starship could go upwards of like 10 grand to buy it. And it's big. People are waiting for it. There are beta releases, but it hasn't been released en masse. And again, they're saying that 2016 is a year that it will come out. So what I'm saying is virtuality is still a big trend, but we're still waiting on how it actually will be adopted. One trend that we don't have to wait for is beacon-based. So if you weren't here with us last year, we predicted falsely that this will be a good trend to be on top of. Beacon-based technology is basically little devices that does emit their own like Wi-Fi signal, and that will connect to any device around that geographic location. So this image is actually for the Apple Eye beacon. They advertise it so retailers can put in like a little discount code, and anyone who enters a store with a device that can connect to their eye beacon will get a code and say like, "Hello Anna, here's like a 50% off discount on these shoes." So this will be like a virtualized experience that is again customized for the person. We predicted that some nonprofits might actually use this for galas, like when you go to the silent auction table, they might get something saying, "Please feel free to like put in the bid number, not your name," or blah blah blah. But what we found is that this technology is actually dying. The adoption hasn't been very great, and we will explain a little bit why that is later. But basically, any device or any technology that is really location based is on the out. Not because the technology isn't good, it's just that adoption is not quite there. It's not what the users are looking for. So all this talk about beacon-based technology leads me to our prediction for this year. And again, keep in mind that these trends that we'll be covering is things that we predict will be playing a large role in the nonprofit sector, not the tech industry in general. The tech industry are playing with smart robots and virtual reality, things that the typical, small to medium-sized nonprofit might not have the funds for. So rather than talk about the trends that might not affect them, let's talk about the ones that we believe will actually make a big impact. So we predict that this is the year, especially for Texasans, to become very integrated, to connect with each other. The first trend of that is dashboards, automated dashboards, not just making them look nice, but actually have them automatically update based on the way that you mapped out the data. So again, data visualization and automation just means taking your data, feeding it into a system that can visualize your data in meaningful ways and have that be automatic. So it's not just you exporting things into a spreadsheet, plugging it into dashboards, seeing the pretty graphs, but a month later, if you don't do that manual upload, it's out of date. What we're predicting is nonprofits are more and more adopting this trend because it's very useful. And more nonprofits will use dashboards for not just finances and marketing, but maybe for operations, for program delivery, to manage program metrics as well. Because as more data becomes available for us to track and measure, more grant foundations are asking for it. They want to know how many users you touch, how many people you save, how many households use your program. If you're not able to track this data in an efficient way, it's harder for you to report back to your funders or your donors, which is right now something that they're looking for. So again, why is this important? It helps the nonprofit make timely and smart decisions because it's automated. We also create a lot more data than we can consume. So when you do automate your dashboards, the computer is better at processing through the large, massive data as opposed to your naked eye on Microsoft Excel. And automation saves you time, and it does reduce human error. The more complicated our systems become and gets more integrated, the more data your trying to combine into one spreadsheet if you're still doing manual uploads. So the more times you're trying to compile data manually together, that is actually a potential for human error, whether it's by omission, by addition, maybe you're copying the same thing twice but you didn't realize. So automation kind of removes that for you. So some of the resources that we think will help is dashboard resources that can actually integrate with the system and have, as long as you have the right talent or the script that you have internally, can update automatically. So internally we do use Zoho, but we also recommend Tableau. It's actually a very great enterprise level program, but is available at a very affordable price through Text of Canada. So if your charity, nonprofit, or library qualifies for it, please look into it. The cost savings are upwards to like $1,000 and I can't do math on the spot. $1,930 that you save. So Tableau desktop 2-year subscription is about $2,000, but you can get it through our program for about $77. So if you're looking at your nonprofit for an automation, or sorry, a dashboard tool that can be automated, that Tableau will be a good option. Before I move on, any questions on this trend? No? Okay. Second one is the device mesh and an ambient user experience. Going back to our prediction of interconnectivity and integration, the digital or online, they also call it the device mesh, is that more and more devices, mobile, apps, programs, websites are becoming really integrated. A best example is think about the last time that you used your Facebook, Google account, or Twitter account to sign in to another service that are not any of those three. There's a lot of new social media networks where they're you can create an account or you can sign in using your Google account. That's actually an example of the digital mesh. Everything is now trying to connect with each other to make your user experience more consistent and easier. So this does touch on responsive design, but it goes beyond that as well. The reason why this is an important trend is our attention span as a whole society is getting shorter. So as of 2015, now it's 8 seconds online, which, as a note, is shorter than a goldfish because a goldfish attention span is 8.5. So with more content being generated, people are constantly being inundated with content that they want to consume, but because there's so much choice, they end up just spending 8 seconds kind of per page. Because of the device mesh, if you're not able to kind of connect with other apps, with other programs, and deliver that consistent user experience, they'll get frustrated. They have to create a new account. That's almost another hindrance for people, and they rather not use your service, and they rather go somewhere else. So that ties into the second point of why it's important. It's really important to deliver that continuous user experience to the best of your ability. Again, I'm not saying that nonprofits now need to invest all their money on developers to make everything connect with each other, but again, to the best of your ability. So something kind of if someone wants to volunteer at your organization, they submit their details, and then right after they're I also want to donate. So they go, but they have to fill out almost the exact same details again, their email, where they live. And again, I'm not going to get into the privacy concerns of this, but another thought is maybe you can provide them a continuous user experience and pre-populate some of those things, especially if it's easy for you and it doesn't compromise their security. So populating their email address or their billing, their home address, where they would like to be contacted, things that will keep the users understanding that this is a continuous session even if it's across different programs, different platforms. And again, the more that your devices are integrated, the possibility for automation is greater. Because if all of your programs are siloed and you're trying to get metrics from all of your different websites, from all of your different website analytics, if they're able to talk to each other, then the data should be easier to mine in that sense. So looking forward, there isn't one tool for you to help with the device mesh, but here are some tips. Invest in responsive design if you haven't already done so, and automate low maintenance decisions, maybe pre-populate for existing users, or if they're a member and you have a login, it'll be great if you remember that this is a logged in session and that they don't have to log in every time they navigate away. And again, integration is key. If you are currently working with programs that don't connect to each other, the next time you invest in something else, think about that. Features and function is important, but integration is almost equally important at this stage. Because if you have a system that is really robust but it doesn't talk to anything else, maintenance is going to be very costly because every time you train staff to maintain this siloed system, that is time that you're investing and also money that you're investing as well. The next trend is hybrid cloud. And the cloud computing trend is vast, but in the nonprofit sector, especially in Canada, has been very scary. Depending on the type of grants that you receive, whether you're receiving a grant from BC or Nova Scotia, there might be a clause saying that your data should be stored on Canadian soil. So a lot of nonprofits are very scared of moving to the cloud trend or going on the cloud trend because they don't want to compromise their data. And we totally understand that. So we want to propose this idea of hybrid cloud, having an internal private server to host your very sensitive data, such as like SIN numbers, health card numbers, patient information, donor info, but things that are not as personal. So maybe you have like an infographic that you're trying to collaborate with an external designer. That's not something that is personalized client and donor information. That might be something you want to put on a cloud platform, whether it's Google Apps or Office 365, something that is easier for you to work with, especially if it's with remote staff. This is important because we cannot ignore that more and more companies are moving to the cloud. So whether we like it or not, Adobe now has Creative Cloud, and we have that actually through Text of Canada. So their desktop applications, they still exist, but in the far future, they're no longer going to make those. So services like Adobe Creative Suite, even QuickBooks, they still have desktop applications, but they also have QuickBooks Online that has more features and more support. So as nonprofits are debating on whether they should move on the cloud trend or not, the sector is already moving in that direction. So instead of waiting until it's too late to plan your integration and how you're going to handle that, it's best to start planning now. Even better to start, having this hybrid cloud model in place. It also helps, this hybrid cloud model, it helps keep your sensitive data in-house. It doesn't all have to go on the cloud, and it doesn't all have to be in data centers around the world. And this also gives you an opportunity to take advantage of the cloud computing benefits. So resources is OwnCloud. So this is actually an open source software that people can download for free and host it on an internal server. But it acts pretty much like a cloud server. It's just completely within your control. So if you have sensitive information that you can't put on the cloud on Microsoft or Apple or Google, you can opt for this option, but just keep in mind that it's still in an internal server, so you have to up your security for your internal server. That's still, IT maintenance and security is still part of that. We also have an article on how the hybrid cloud would work and how it can help your organization if you're interested in learning more about that model. The fourth one is adaptive security. So this kind of ties in with the last trend of, this adoption of cloud services. More services, actually I should explain what it is. So adaptive security is basically trying to go a level beyond just firewalls and antivirus. So at an organization, typically, if they want to protect their information, they have a perimeter defense, which is a firewall, where it controls your data coming in and out. And it has some rules around what is suspicious data, suspicious traffic, so then it would stop that, or data that is authorized. Rule-based security is like antivirus programs, or any programs that would protect you from like malware. So those programs are rule-based. Anything that looks suspicious, like if it's from a Nigerian prince, mark it as spam. Those are rule-based. So in the past, and still present, these are still active, like really great tools to have. But the problem that nonprofits will see is that once they set up these defenses, they lean back and they wait until something hits one of those two things, and then they'll respond. This is typically called incident response. But the trend now is to be more, you take more initiative of the security into your own hands. So in terms of an incident response, there should be continuous monitoring. So again, it's more of a philosophy of how you think about IT security. Instead of just setting up your wall and then laying back, it's setting up the wall, you should still have it, but also actively keep an eye out for upcoming threats, identifying weak points in your system, and trying your best to patch that. The reason why it's important is because cloud services, there's so many different tools and platforms for every little thing. In the group that we're talking about, we talked about infographics. There are actually tools online where you can create an infographic, have it integrate with your database so it would update the infographic real time. So that's a great new tool, but it's integrating with your database, which means it has access to it. So if that tool is compromised, your system is also compromised. So more cloud-based programs that you're integrating to your system, it does affect your security. Your internal security might be really great, but the tool that you're connecting it to, also watch out for that tool. We also talk about, or we've seen this emerging hacker industry. If you aren't aware, actually, I will ask you a question. Who here has heard of social engineering? Okay, this is like a good half. So half the room have heard of social engineering. If you're not aware of it, I will explain it now. So this is really text-based. I'll just paint you a picture. Social engineering is actually a way for people to compromise your data without even touching code. They probably don't even have a background in IT. They don't know what they're doing, but because they're smart and they're cunning, and they have maybe the pieces of information that they need to compromise your data. So this is actually a case study from like 2012. Matt Honan is a senior writer at Wired, and if you're not sure what Wired is, it's an IT magazine, almost like Rolling Stones, but in the tech industry. He got his accounts compromised. Actually, he got 3 of his accounts deleted, all because the person got a hold of his website address. So if you're interested in seeing how this actually plays out, we have a blog post on this. If you type in paranoid on our website, it'll take you to this chart. And again, this slide will be made available for everyone so you can see how the hacker did it. But essentially, he took his website, got more information based on the website, and then leading down all the way towards he actually got access into his Gmail account and then deleted a whole bunch of accounts because, as you know, Google integrates with almost anything. So once you've got that, you have access to everything. So in this case, the person did not touch he didn't actually break any security protocols. So the people at Apple, the people at Amazon, the people at Twitter, it didn't have any incidents that came up because he was doing everything according to the rules. But what he's doing is using his own strategy to take the information that he needs to get more information about this person's account. So that's what I mean by this emerging hacker industry where it's beyond just a rule-based thing. People are being sneaky about the information that they have to try to get more information to get into your system. And again, I don't need to emphasize the high consequences when you do have a compromised database. Canada is actually one of the strictest places in North America for online privacy. Our CASL, the Canadian anti-spam legislation, is one of the strictest online legislation that exists. So we do take privacy very seriously in Canada. So try your best as an organization to continuously monitor your potential threats and respond to it for the sake of your clients and donors. So some of the resources is don't think that perimeter defense like firewalls and antivirus programs aren't good. They are, but invest in the most effective ones. So I know this is being recorded, but I'm going to go on record of saying Bitdefender is one of the better security programs out there. It's better than Symantec by Norton. So if you're looking at antivirus programs, we do recommend looking at Bitdefender. Year after year, they've been tested by third-party antivirus labs, and they come up with flying colors. So look into that. They're also really affordable through our program. And then here's an article by Gartner about adaptive security. And again, it's a little bit generic, but it's very thorough on how you can take the steps to analyze the security at your organization and apply it. The 5th trend is marketers or people touching digital property are learning to code. So last year I made this prediction that everyone's going to learn to code because I'm too enthusiastic, but I realized it's mainly people who are touching, again, managing online properties. So these are people who are not in tech, they don't have a background in technology, but if you even touch the website, if you're managing social media, anything to do with the web and online, more and more people are finding the need to actually read and write code. Maybe not from scratch, but at least enough to adjust it. So when I say code, I mean basic markup languages. I'm not talking about programming. I'm not saying that everyone's going to be a programmer or developer in like 2 years. But markup languages like HTML and CSS. So a little bit of a word on JavaScript. JavaScript is a programming language, but it's very simple compared to like Ruby or Python. So marketers are actually starting to learn JavaScript because the barrier, the barrier to entry is relatively low. So HTML defines the content. It tells you like what to expect on the page. CSS makes it look pretty. It makes it look presentable. And then JavaScript defines behavior. So it could be maybe animation when you click on something, or maybe it's like a navigation bar that slides as people are going through it. So this is what the markup languages that I'm referring to. And the reason why I believe this is an important trend for marketers is you do need it. There are so many tools out there that actually rely on the fact that you have this knowledge to really control it. There's a lot of free open source tools that come out of the box, but when you're not sure the potential of these tools, you're not sure what else you could do to be more effective on your nonprofit. So whether it's creating emails on an email campaign, if you don't know a bit about code, you're not sure if that responsive email template was broken or not. A lot of the faith will be on the developer who first made the template, but as you're working on it, if you know a little bit of code, you can tell when things are a little bit broken. So whether you have that information to just read and glance through and see if there's something that you should be worried about, that is information that will benefit the organization as opposed to you making these email campaigns and then months later realizing that it's not displaying properly. It will become a common asset. Online there's this ongoing tweet chat hashtag called NPMC, which stands for Nonprofit Marketing and Communications. And this is something that if you are in the nonprofit communications or marketing industry, good chat to be involved with. They share a lot of information about upcoming like blog trends or SEO tools and tips. But more and more conversations around the fact that they need to learn how to code so they can create effective campaigns, which is the third area of why this is important. When you understand how the system works, you can create a campaign specific for that program. So if you know the limits of WordPress, you won't design something beyond what it can handle. If you know the limits of your current system, even if it's outdated, then you know what you can expect the developer to do, even if the system, again, is outdated. So some resources, Code Academy offers free interactive code courses, so you can learn everything, even up to programming languages through Code Academy for free. There are e-learning, there are e-courses. So if you want to learn in person, Code.org and Ladies Learning Code, they offer really great in-person workshops. I also forgot to mention Camp Tech. They actually operate out of this building. So if this location is convenient, also look up Camp Tech. They also offer in-person workshops at a very affordable price. So that is the tech scene, but there's also this other area of web design that a lot of nonprofits also struggle with. So we do want to devote some time into that. So web design wise, we do believe that this is a year that nonprofits are going to focus on usability, user experience. That's what the UX stands for. The first one is this web design graphic trend of Flat 2.0. Flat 2.0 is actually improvement of this really hip modern trend of flat. So flat design is basically anything that looks like very minimalistic, very simple, there's no depth perception. But Flat 2.0, also known as like semi-flat or almost flat, or how Google wants to coin it, material design, that's like the upcoming term coming, is you reintroduce some subtle elements of depth, like some shadow, some weight. The reason why this is important is, here's an example. So this is, I don't want to pick on the nonprofit industry too much, so this is an example from like the e-commerce industry. This is a menu, navigation menu. So I'm going to pull the room. based on this, and this is flat design, which of these things are clickable? Feel free to shout them out, and I can, do I have a pointer? Yeah. Which of these things are clickable?
One's under the headings.
So the one that's under the headings,
Yeah.
other, I heard something else.
What of them?
All of them? Okay. So this is actually a very neat exercise because and this is a really great article, there has been case studies done on user experience and how people interpret the web. And they found that young adults, described as people in the millennial age, they've learned what flat design is. So people who are saying the things under the menu, I'm going to say you are really hip. You're on with the times, you know what is up with flat design. So the web has designed an experience for you that you've learned. This is learned behavior to say like these gray things are the clickable areas. But a lot of people will also say maybe the header is like, you, sir, you said everything. In this case, you are wrong. It's the people who said the gray text is clickable. Flat design is very appealing, but it's actually not great for users. When people are not sure what elements they can click on, it decreases conversions and it increases frustration, and then they'll just leave your web page because they don't know how to navigate it. So for example, shop and about Villa Ska is bolded, but there's no other indication of what is a link, so a lot of people think this is the link because it's really bold. But the actual links are these grayed out links. Does that kind of make sense? So flat design, even though it's very hip and modern, it's not good for usability. If you can imagine the days of like internet in the 90s, it's kind of ugly, but it's actually very usable. So signifiers before flat. Links are typically like this, or purple. Underline, bold, bright blue, so people know that this is a link. I know this will take me to another web page. Or things that try to imitate real buttons. Like you see like that, almost like 3D look. You're like, that's a button I can click on. But after flat, it all kind of blurs because everyone's trying to be creative with their CSS. Sometimes when you hover over a link, it becomes a hand, but not always. Sometimes it becomes like a text icon because they think it looks nicer and sleeker. So a lot of people are becoming confused about what is actually clickable in flat design, which is why material design or flat 2.0 is actually a better way of designing the web. One, it creates a positive and more confident user experience. They know exactly what they can click on and what elements are just for show, for aesthetics, and it will help you increase conversion rates. If you want nonprofits to donate, if you want them to sign a petition, sign up for your newsletter, register for a webinar, they need to know what is a link and what is an image. So Flat 2.0 is almost like the standardized way of designing for the web. So some resources is Google's Introduction to Material Design, which I will go on record of saying is ironic because it's in flat design. That's okay. They will get there, but material design is basically saying, hey developers and graphic designers, that's all adhere to one standard so our users won't get confused. Start using subtle shadows to indicate what is in the foreground, maybe like a button, and also reintroduce weights. So people are not just looking at one plane and trying to guess what is just an image and what is actually text. And again, going back to the NN group, they have a really nice article detailing what is exactly 2.0 and why is it better for your users. So if this is something you're interested in, I do highly recommend these resources. Now the second trend is people are getting really creative with scrolling, which is great for nonprofits because we tell great stories. So this is an example of like just a website template, and it looks crazy animated, but this is a website. So as you're scrolling, elements are changing based on HTML or CSS. But for the nonprofit sector, the most prevalent trend is infinite scrolling, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, and long scrolling / parallax. So infinite scrolling is when you go on a website and it does not separate the search results by pages. It's a continuous loading mechanism. So as you hit the end of the page, it populates the rest of the content that's there. So this is an example from the World Wildlife Foundation in Canada. If you go on their blogs, they have infinite scrolling for their blogs. This is actually really great for mobile because instead of trying to click on a number on your phone, you can just, lazily just keep swiping up and then it'll eventually load everything. I will get into the pros and cons of this trend, but this is what infinite scrolling is. There's also this concept of long scrolling. Long scrolling is basically an entire website on one page. So as you scroll down, you see all the features about us, contact us, and typically it ends off with a really nice form with maybe a map of where they are located, because that's usually what the template is. Sometimes the long scrolling involves separate smaller web pages that they link to. So for example, One Education is a long scrolling website, even though they have these links, that does go to smaller pages. But again, these pages are again just one page. The next step up from long scrolling is parallax scrolling. So parallax is not a new concept. It's actually been in the gaming industry since the 80s. It's basically this technique of making the background move at a slower pace than the foreground, so it creates a 3D effect. So if you played games, think about Street Fighter or Mario, where as you're walking you're really fast, but the background is moving really slow, so it creates like this perception of depth. So people are getting really creative. This is the Seattle Space Needle. There's other parallax scrolling examples, but I picked this one because I want you to notice that as I'm scrolling through this website, it's going up. So when you go to this website, you can't scroll down, which is what users are used to. So this website creates this story of going up the Space Needle, which makes sense. But this takes me to the pros and cons of this trend. So one, the pro is it helps storytelling. If you have a story that can be enhanced by this creative scrolling trend, do it. It's amazing. People are like me, are sharing it. It tells a really great story. It sets the mood and it keeps people engaged, and it resonates with them. They remember your website more. Going back to the infinite scrolling trend, it does help manage large amounts of data. So if you can think about Google search engine, when you type in, like a charity for saving local wildlife, that will give you a lot of search results. Chances are you're not going to go all the way to page like 1,000. You're going to look at the first 3 pages. But if it's an infinite scrolling one, you don't know when it ends, so you might actually, go through all 1,000 pages without knowing it. But on the other side, it might actually cause you to lose conversions, because as you're scrolling through, as a user scrolling through, it looks so pretty and it's engaging. They don't want to stop to click on a call to action. So as they're looking through the blogs, they might be like, "Ooh, that blog is interesting, but I'll get back to it later because I want to see what else is there." But because there's no pages, once they stop and they're like, "I want to go back to that blog," now they're lost. They don't know where their blog is because you loaded everything. Again, there might be a loss of control. The Space Needle is an example of the user, me. I'm used to scrolling down. So when I got to this website, it was a very weird experience to try to scroll up. Some people might be really captivated by this, but most likely majority of people will be very frustrated that you just hijack their experience. So this is something to keep in mind. It's really trendy. It's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. It's great for storytelling, but do it in moderation. So we have some articles that if you want to learn more about these scrolling trends and links to other resources and plugins, because again, it depends on your website system. If you have a CMS, there's most likely a plugin for you. But if you're still doing like the traditional hosted email with HTML and like CSS and jQuery like hosted on your internal site, you need to do a little bit more research. So here are some articles about these trends that will give you and connect you to the right resources that will actually help your nonprofit. The third trend in web design is rich animation. So this animation is purely in CSS. There is no plugin, there is no thing that you need to download. When you go to this page, it just loads as animation. More and more nonprofits are starting to realize that they can actually use animation to tell a better story. So if scrolling thing doesn't quite work, you can always go with a really nice animation. Using CSS to create an animation is still a little bit too high tech. So what we think will be the most compelling for nonprofits is cinemagraphs. So cinemagraphs is actually a combination of a still image with a moving animation, but it's so short and it loops very seamlessly that you can actually save it as a GIF format. So it's an actual picture format like this one, water.nature.org, that loops on the background of your website. The good thing about Cinegraphs is that it's actually mobile friendly. So if you go to water.nature.org, you see this on your phone. The problem with Cinegraphs is they take a long time to produce because it's a combination of two file formats then compressed into an image. I'll talk a little bit more about this later. This will make more sense when you learn about video backgrounds, which I'm sure everyone has seen, especially if you're like me and you love Charity Water. Like they're kind of like the forefront of tech adoption. But because everyone has, they've seen Charity Water, here's another example from a nonprofit that uses a video background. So video backgrounds are basically like an MP4 that plays on loop on the background of your website. It's easier to produce because you just need to film a short segment and upload it and just make sure it's on auto loop. But the problem is it's not mobile friendly. So if you go to therisenchurch.com or charitywater.org on your mobile, it looks different than on your computer. They have a still image on mobile, whereas water.nature.org looks exactly the same. Cinegraphs load faster. It's a lot less data for your phone to manage, which is why video backgrounds, although they're really fancy and they're easier to make, Cinegraphs might be the way to go if you want to make sure that user experience is consistent. So again, why is this important? Video backgrounds are sexy. People see it and they're engaged because you set an ambiance online. It's a lot more interactive than a still image. So if you do want to like go a step beyond and really interact with your audience, this might be a way to go. And again, it resonates better because people remember stories and images more than just like really fancy flat design text. Some resources is stock footage for free, and I landed on this because I want to show you that this is the exact clip for Waterhole, and they got it completely free. They basically took that video, converted it into a GIF, and made it a cinemagraph for their website. So that image, even though it's so pretty, they got it, again, completely free. So if you're interested in that, this is a good resource for it. And then Cinegraph, how to make it in 7 easy steps. This includes, this assumes that you have Adobe Photoshop and Premiere. So I guess it's not easy if you don't have those programs. But this is the reason why Cinegraphs take a little bit longer. This is a still image that was clipped, and then they're going to insert the animation in the background here. And that's how you become, how it looks like a still image, but with a looped animation.
There's also an app called Flixel that does the same thing.
There's actually a lot of apps for making cinemagraphs now, but because they're all new and I don't want to recommend something and later on they're like, this compromised my data. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. But like, look into it. There's a lot of apps that can make cinemagraphs. And like
they're not cheap though. Like Flixel's not exactly, the Apple app is not exactly cheap to buy if you're looking, if you don't have a budget for it. So, like the actual usable version.
So have you tried it? Is it
yeah,
good?
It works well.
Okay.
I mean, I like making GIFs as part of my own creative practice, so I've explored it a bit, but it's not exactly a cheap application for a nonprofit.
Okay. Well, that's good to know, like having options out there, whether it's free or maybe expensive.
Yeah, no,
So the next trend is ditching the stock photo. So we had this last year, but we see that the nonprofit industry is just starting to like really fully embrace it, so we're featuring it again. This typical stock photo is this kind of insincere, infamously known as being staged, and people know it. At this point, they know that it's staged, they know that this is not your staff members or your clients. And the embarrassing thing is, with Google reverse image search, they can easily find other nonprofits that are using the same image. So this is an example of 3 different nonprofits using the same image for different means. And it's also a little bit unfortunate that these nonprofits have a similar color branding, so that's okay. But basically, this trend is to leave that staged look behind because people online are craving real stories. If you're not able to give a real photograph, giving a staged looking one actually decreases the appeal of your story, even if it's expertly written. So before I go to the resources, so more nonprofits are opting for their own photos, even if it's not at the professional grade of a studio lighting with like blurred faces. They're going for real photos because even if it's not that professional grade quality, people like that. People want raw stories. They want to be able to connect with your actual impact. But again, depending on the size of your nonprofit, you might not have time to create your own internal stock portfolio. So the next thing is to opt for stock images that actually give that feeling of a real story. So these are some free resources. There are a lot more. These are the ones that we internally use as well. Pixels is a curation of stock photos. Unsplash is like they take all these photographs and every week they upload 10 more. Same as Startup Stock. The reason why I like to recommend these three is because they're public domain. You don't need to do attribution, even though that would be really nice, but as a nonprofit, you know, like you're strapped for time, you don't want to keep putting all these credits in like one photograph. So all of these images are public domain, which is CC0. So you can grab them, you can use them for whatever purpose you want, and you don't have to fear the need of someone like watching your website and saying, that was actually my photograph and you use it without my permission. So this is actually great resources for that. The last web design trend is big and bold typography. So typography is using or arranging text to make the image more appealing. And this also goes hand in hand with people exploring typefaces that are just beyond the default ones. Default meaning the things that come with your program, like Times New Roman, even Helvetica for you Apple users, that is default, and Arial or Calibri is looking at other other fonts that are free, and exploring how to use them. So this is an example of typography, using type, arranging it to make it look like a graphic design image. So this, I'll say, it is Charity Water. I have to use them for something. So this has a really nice clean look to it. Using default abandoning default typefaces would be white ribbon. So this font here is Babus New Regular, which is again a free font, but it's not the typical font that you would normally see, and it comes off as being like bold, really strong, which is the image that they want. So why is this important? In the age of flat design and material design, you're working with less graphic elements. So actually using typography to make your brand more appealing, to stand out from everyone else, is actually a really useful technique. Web fonts are also becoming more and more accessible. So in the days of past, the reason why we all use DFont is because we know each computer will have Times New Roman, will have Arial, so then people will view your website as you designed it. But now, there are a lot of resources out there that are hosting different types of fonts that you can get access to. The most popular is Google Fonts. So all of these fonts are hosted on their servers, and you can use them. You can use these as default fonts on your website, and as long as that person has internet connection, which they most likely will if they're going to your website, they will see these fonts. If you still want to opt for, uploading a default font on your server that people have to download and load, you can take any of these free open source fonts on FontSquare. And again, these are all free and they're all very pretty, and it helps nonprofits kind of stake out their own brand voice without using really complicated animations or graphic design. So I have a bonus trend, and the reason why I don't want to number this is my wild guess. So after looking at all these trends, you're thinking my nonprofit is on the wall. I'm doing all of those things, what else is there? If you're up for it, there's this new trend to make your website touch supported. So touch supported events is basically what you see here, is more than just scrolling up and down and left and right, it's tilting your device. It might be like zooming in and out. You see these things in like corporate apps, or like on an iPhone, if you want to enlarge an image, you just do this. If you want to decrease it, you do that. But not all websites have that feature. So the next step for nonprofits is maybe you want to experiment with this. Why would this? Yeah. Why would you want to experiment with this? It does play really well with mobile devices. And the adoption of mobile devices is large, because mobile includes tablets, includes your phones, and as phones are getting bigger and bigger, the more surface area for people to play with. And it does increase engagement on your webpage. If you want to retain people's attention and have them stay on your webpage, that might be a way for them to stay there because there's so many different areas of the website that they can interact with. And again, because this is relatively new, not everyone is doing this. If you're the first to kind of experiment with this, you will make headlines and people will be very interested in sharing this resource because you're kind of like leading that technology edge in the nonprofit industry. So some resources are some free open source code that you can implement. Maybe not you, but maybe a developer friend of yours or an internal staff member. PhotoSwipe is the most basic, it's 4 images. But Dragon is a little bit more complicated. They do touch support events for your entire website. So if you have the knowledge and the talent to implement it, feel free to try this for your next microsite. I don't recommend doing it on your main website because I don't want to be responsible for breaking it. But if you are going to make like a micro campaign for like a fundraiser or a petition or just a one-time event, try it. You know, like if you're going to build it from scratch, if you implement these features from the beginning, it might actually turn out to be a really great engagement tool. So those are our thoughts at TechSoup Canada. I'm interested in hearing what your thoughts are on these trends, and if there's a trend that you think I missed, what would it be?
The one thing you haven't mentioned at all is accessibility, and there's laws coming in. The Ontarians with Disabilities Act, of course, comes more into force this year.
Yes.
Which we've been looking at fairly closely. And a lot of these trends are quite difficult to make aligned with. You can't be doing this with an accessible website.
Yeah.
So there's some of that stuff battling it out, I find.
So
yeah.
that is a great thought, and I guess the way that I see trends is more like the trendy things, but like being compliant with the law is a must-have.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't be
It's
just
pretty
like
hard,
this like glowing trend, but it is really important. I do want to call it out for nonprofits that are not quite sure. ONN is actually a great place for resources if you want to know about compliance and the dates that you need to be compliant with that law is. We haven't narrowed down the details, but at TechSoup Canada we also are trying to have a webinar on this, similar to when CASEL came into effect. We had a 2-part series on CASEL and how your nonprofit can be compliant. So we're also trying to get that in the works this year. But that's a really good point. Everyone should remember that and take that back to your organization. You need to be accessible. Your website should be accessible, and your online web properties.
There was a comment online from Q that was mentioning that there is not much choice out of the box fonts in Dreamweaver.
Oh, so Dreamweaver is if you're not familiar, it's like an Adobe program that is basically like a visual graphic editor for you to manipulate HTML, and I believe CSS at this point. So it's a good point that Dreamweaver doesn't come with a lot of great default fonts, but going back to the resource of Font Scroll, you can download and it will recognize it, and then you can use it for it. I'm going ahead. So you can download custom fonts that doesn't come with the program, and then Adobe Dreamweaver, Microsoft Word, Publisher, PowerPoint, any desktop application that you have will then recognize your installed font. But if you're doing that for the web, just also keep in mind that you do need to upload the type file, which is like open type format, to your server. So like your web hosting server, so then people can download that as well. If you want to go with the easier option, which is going with a Google Web font, they actually have instructions on how you would do that. So as you're manipulating your pages in Dreamweaver, just keep in mind that the font might be a little bit different once you upload it. I don't know if that helps.
Okay.
All right. So I'm gonna just do a quick time check because okay. So if you guys have no other thoughts on trends or like other things that you would like to learn more about, please feel free to like still stay behind. We have a lot of food, and then we can kind of talk just more casually more instead of me standing at the front of the room. Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming. What is this sexy slide? This one.
Oh, thanks.
I don't think anyone's gonna figure it out.
Yeah, it's
hard.
it's weird.
I
Thank
Yeah, like I keep mentioning charity, but they wanted charity on the website. That was good for
Sure.
Like there are yeah, for sure. Like there are nonprofits in Canada.
Specifically in
Especially if it's like
workshops on
because like again like especially online, I'm not sure what their background is. So to your point, true, a lot of this jobs are not for free accessible for everyone. But it is something for
I was,
Very accessible.
working at
there's no clue, like if I'm just going to
But yeah, I would never figure that out.
to do
It
that.
says pull to share.
yeah, so my background
As soon as I would go to this, I'm like, what the hell did I see that?
I used to say, like, I used to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't like I